Hello, my friends. John LaRuffa here with another Straight Up Solo. And in this episode, we're going to take a look at this game right here, the 10th volume in the coin series, All Bridges Burning. This is a very, very heavy game. Coin is always a heavy game. I want to explain to you what I think about it from my, I'll say, limited experience solo, even though I've been playing it for a while as far as the game. It takes a long time to play one of these games. And so I'm going to give you my initial impressions and my experience of it compared to some other coin games that I've played. So let's go ahead and take a look and see if this is something for you in your solo collection. Okay, folks, and as usual, please like and subscribe to my YouTube channel because I'm really trying to get this channel off the ground and I really need your help doing it. Okay, so what we've got here is a more compressed coin than other ones, all right? You can already see right away the map is smaller. And I think that's good from a solo perspective because there's not as much going on, and I would say that that this game is more approachable, I think, than many other ones. It's much more approachable than Fire in the Lake, more approachable than the one in India, the Gandhi one, and also what is it, Falling Sky. It's kind of on the lines of Falling Sky. So those are the couple that I've played. I still have the India game, and I have this one, obviously. I sold the other two because I think that Falling Sky, if that's what it's called, yeah, I hope it is. It's the one about the early Romans and the tribes, the Gauls, and the conquest there. That was a really good one from a solo perspective, but I thought that the flow charts were still kind of just bothersome and cumbersome. The one in India, Gandhi, replace that with these decks, which this one also has over here, which I really like because that makes the solo a little bit easier and a little more fun to kind of figure out. Now, the basic deal of this is like any coin game, okay? In any coin game, you have a lot of, I'd say, complex actions to take, and the actions can be similar depending on who you're playing, but these player aids really help you to determine what you're going to do. You can rally to add pieces to the board. You can activate them so they could do stuff and be helpful for you and try to move influence around. You can terrorize different things and it kind of helps you set in motion, helps you dig deeper into what you want to do to get some influence on your side and also prevent others from doing that, and adjusts other things, the polarity track and all sorts of other jazz. You can attack and you can march. And so these 5 main commands are very similar, I would say, to most of the main factions in other coin games. Okay, and then you always have the special activities that are specific to what the game is all about. In this case, you've got the political event, which helps you raise or gain resources. You have foreign relationships, which helps, or relations, which helps you bring in more of your friendly troops. In this case, because it's the Reds, we're talking about Russians. And then prepare, which helps you to be more effective when you are about to fight in battle, or to also deter by blocking the ease of movements of trains along the boards. You can sabotage things. And that's what the Reds do. The Senate is quite similar in that they have the same main actions. They also have political event, foreign relations, prepare, but they also can do coordinate, okay, which allows them to be more in control of this completely non-playing independent factor of the Germans, and crack down where they can remove opposition. So opposition is good for the Russians, the red folks, not the Russians, the Reds, and support is good for the Senate, the white. And then you have the third faction here, the moderates, okay? And the moderates have basically a different feel to them than the other two. The other two are very complementary to each other as far as similar actions, fighting each other. The moderates can rally to put things on the board, but they also can do a message, which message allows them to move around. Negotiate helps kind of shift polarization and settle things into the middle, which helps them to be better, to kind of take the steam out of one side or the other in favor of what they're doing, the moderates. And then politics helps you advance political issues, which you need. Once these get resolved, you need those for the victory conditions. They can also add their personality. They can do the dialogue, which allows them to shift things from opposition to support and really go back to neutral. And then publish helps them get more resources. Each of the factions has a different victory condition, and they're all written here. And even Russia and Germany can win if basically nobody wins, then Russia or Germany wins based on a couple of different things. Basically, the way it works is that Reds have to get active opposition out on the board. They want to have as much active opposition on the board as possible, plus the number of administrations. If you can do that and you can exceed 12, plus the Russian vassalage is 2 or less, I believe it is. I think that's what it says. Let's see, and Russian vassalage plus polarization is less than 5. So basically, if you can get support for Reds and calm the country down with the polarization and not have so much Russian influence, you win as the Reds. The Senate is similar, except their focus is getting control of towns. So instead of the support, they just want control of at least 4 population worth of towns. And all the towns are worth 1, except for Helsinki is a 2 population town. If you can do that, get to 4, and also have the German vassalage plus the polarization less than or equal to 5, they win. Okay, and the moderates are completely different. The moderates need to have at least 15 resource points, and they have to have resolved networks plus 1 is greater than the polarization. So basically what they do is they have networks on the board, which I have 2 right now, or they have 2, and they have resolved 2 issues. So that means 4. So this should actually be 5, pardon me. So you have 2 resolved issues plus the 2 networks plus 1 is 5. Now, if polarization can go below that or equal to it, then they win, okay? And there's some tiebreakers and things like that. But in the solo game, you have to basically prevent any of that happening at any point of the game. You have to go all 4 propaganda rounds and then be the one with the best margin of victory, okay? So it's like any other coin game. You have a slog in front of you. And it's a good slog, don't get me wrong. But this is a game of, basically like slow sumo wrestling on ice. You try to make traction, you get moving, you charge in, you kind of make a move, someone else hits you, they go backwards. It's a lot of give and tug, pull and push, those kinds of things. The events will get familiar once you play them, but like any coin game, this is heavy. It's heavy, hard to understand the nuances. It's a little bit easier than some other ones just because the actions are a bit more straightforward. But demonstrating them to you guys is something that I can kind of do. And the way you do that is you resolve. We always look at these. There's an event deck that drives the actions, right? And in this case, you can tell what's coming up, and then you have your main one. What's interesting about this coin, and especially good from a solo perspective, is that not only is there only 3 factions, which I think is much more reasonable to manage as a solo player, but each of these factions can potentially go in any given turn depending on what happens. So unlike other coins where only 2 of them would be eligible and 2 of them wouldn't be, here you could actually have all 3 eligible, and also have a German phase too. So the way it works is you're going to look at a card, and the card is going to tell you a couple of different events that one could take. Usually the light event helps the Senate, and the dark event helps the Reds. Not always. And then if you see, they can go either way, I guess, with the moderates. It all depends on the situation. In the solo game, if you ever see something marked over here, then the solo faction will prefer, if they can, to take the event. If you see a P in there, they'll actually pass to take the event. So they would pass in the round prior, I should say. And if it has a little I, it'll take the event, and it'll tell you how to do that event, specifically with a handy dandy chart, which has all of this is what you do in these cases. And there they are. I will say that the player aids for this game are fantastic. They're always fantastic. They're essential because the rules of play are so thick. You know, they write these things for coin games like you're writing a PhD paper. I mean, and I guess that's just the way the style is. And anyone who gets into this game has to know that. You are going to have the thickest rule book you've ever read in your entire life whenever you deal with a GMT game. And that's okay if you understand how to do that. Same thing with like 18xx games or other games by GMT. The coin series is no different. You'll also find once you finish reading the rules, if you're like me, that doesn't exactly tell you how to play. I mean, it teaches you the rules, but you have to drive this game. It's just like studying how to drive a car. You learn all the rules of the road, but you gotta drive to be able to get the feel. And the playbook definitely helps with that, which is good. So the playbook will walk you through a couple of different turns, and I highly recommend, even though you feel like you wanna jump right in, I highly recommend you do go through this and take the actions and put it on the board and watch it happen. And then they even give you the non-player examples for, you know, for solo, which is really key. They tell you what they do. They show you how they do it with the cards. And let's talk about that right now. So these cards are nice in the fact that there's 3 different decks. When it's a person's turn, like for instance, when it's the blue turn, we already know if I was to play this right now that they would take the event. So they would basically just move their counter over here to event, and we would do exactly what it says. In this case, it says moderate resources +3 or moderates place a cube in political display. So I would go ahead and see, do I want to have more resources? Well, no, they've got plenty. So they play a cube in political display. So earlier in the rules, you would read that I roll a dice whenever I do that, and depending on what it says, I put it in a spot. And I believe the dice, if I remember correctly, is 1 or 2 is for the Russians, 3 or 4 is for the Senate, and 5 or 6 is for the one that's not part of the actual player. So in that case, not part of the actual player. So we would go ahead, and I'm playing the Reds in this game, so we would put a white cube up there. And that's their turn. Next would be the white, okay? Now the whites will, the Senate, they will go ahead and we'll shuffle these cards here, and then we'll flip up one, and we'll see if the conditions apply. Phase 2 and active Senate cells and Senate cells available. Well, that's true. We are in phase 2 because we're in the last propaganda round, and there is one available. So we're going to go ahead and do what it says. It says rally in up to 3 spaces. Then it'll tell you where to prioritize those things. So first, add Senate control at a +1 population. Do a town first, if at all possible. Okay. Then if that one's done, then you go to the next one. At each Senate capability where there are reds. Then the next one at two largest Senate groups where there are reds. And then finally, if you've done all those things where they don't exist, then you would do a random +1 population space. The random, you could do it many different ways, but they do have a random space chooser right here. You can follow this situation. I find it's much easier when you only have a couple to just make it work with a dice space, you know, if like 1 or 2 is here, 3 or 4 is there, 5 or 6 is there, or whatever, but you can use that chart if you need to. So let's go ahead and do that. We have 1 available, and the first condition they said was to add Senate control at a 1+ population town. Well, they have control all over the place except here. This is the only place they don't. So they're going to add this Senate cube, or the cylinder there. Sorry, hex, whatever you want to call it. Then they're going to gain control. We're going to put a control marker in there, and that now gives them control of another population town, which advances them to 5. They have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in control. They're strongly in a position to win should we finish this game that way. So they did, in that case, the command. And we're going to then go to the next spot down and see if either of these did not work, they would just do a limited command. If I did multiple places, which I could if I had more available forces, then that would be a full command anyway. But in this case, it still could be limited. Let's take a look. It says crackdown on the most opposition available. Well, I'm not doing very well in this game, as you can tell. So crackdown would be where there's opposition, where they are. Well, the only place that they could crack down right there is right there. So, because everywhere else, they've already squashed it. So what they're going to do is they're going to do the crackdown action. Now, just like the rally, which I knew by heart, because I've done it enough, you really still have to come back here and read how do you do that action until you figure it out. So for instance, that's moderate, sorry. So for instance, Crackdown says remove opposition. Any one space with Senate control and active cells and opposition. Well, do we have that? There's Senate control in all these spaces, but the only place that has opposition is over here, and there's no active Senates. They're not flipped over. So we can't even do crackdown. So we skip that completely and see foreign relations. Now, foreign relations says, if the Germans have 3 or plus vassals, then do it. All right? Well, guess what? They don't. So this actually was not a full command. It was a limited command. So we will slide that there, indicating what they're going to do. And that is it. That's the turn. So what we do then is we advance to the next round. We will pull this card off the top of the deck, place it over here, showing that now this is the active event. And we will flip this over, and it'll give us some understanding what's coming next. I know that's off camera, but I think you get the gist. Now over here, and this is the unique thing to this game, we look at the letter priority and then start to determine priority based on where people are from the previous round. So in this case, B, C, D. Okay, if someone had passed, they'd be A. So I will be going first, then C will be going second, then D will be going third. And because this has a German action in it, we're going to roll a die, and then 1, 2, 3, the Germans are going to go first. 4, 5, 6, they're going to go last. Okay, they're going first. So if we wanted to carry out another round, I would go to my German table, and I'd figure out, okay, based on the flow chart, what are the Germans going to do? Well, they only have units here. And so basically what we would see is the Germans are going to eventually attack because they have troops, so they don't do this. The Senate did not play their coordination. They don't need to land because they're already there. We go right to attack because Germans are in troop with enemies on the map, okay? So the attack phase is probably the most difficult thing to figure out. And they do a good job procedural-wise about how to explain it, but it did take me several long turns to figure out what to do. And what you have to do is you have to go through this list to determine the attack modifier, the attack strength, okay? Now, in solo, the actual solo players will start with a major strength anyway. So like Senate always starts with a 7, I believe. And the Germans would start with a 5, regardless of what the situation is. And that would simulate your ability to pump in resources because the solo player never uses, or the AI never uses resources to pay for their actions, which is handy, but it also can be kind of difficult because there's lots of things in this game that say you can add resources to do one thing or another. And it's sort of unclear to me sometimes how that works, because it says add resources for the max of this or the max of that. So you have to assume to yourself, if there's no special rule, or did I forget a special rule? Does that happen? Do I add the max? So for instance, in the attack, that was always a confusion until I finally found that little thing that said in the rule book, this is the situation, they always start with a 7. Okay, but it is, I'm sorry, I mean, and everyone who's played a coin knows this, but it is hard to find some of these things sometimes, and they have good, frequently asked questions and everything else. But I mean, when you don't know exactly where to look, and they do have an appendix here trying to help you. But the solo kind of, and it always is like this. The AI is just a little bit different until you understand what's going on, and it's almost like even though these things are so fantastic, it's almost like you need another kind of thing to help you with it. And it may even be in here. It's just so difficult sometimes to figure out where things are. And I guess you can tell that that's one of my main challenges with coin games is that you have to bottle everything up in your brain, and you have to really be proficient at this to actually enjoy the game, to feel it becoming, something that is actually easy to play and has a flow. Otherwise, there's a big challenge. So I'm going to stop right here. I could demonstrate the attack, but I'd probably get it wrong because I'd have to sit here and it takes me some time still to look everything up and be double checking what I'm doing. And so playing this game has taken me a long time. I've actually had it set up for, a couple of weeks, and I chip away at it. And don't get me wrong, I knew I was getting into that, and I like doing that. But it is not easy just to learn the system and jump in and play a full game and be done. So I'll go ahead and take you back to one more thing I actually have to explain. The whole game comes down to this propaganda round. And in the propaganda round is basically where you check for victory, You do a couple of bookkeeping things, but then you are going to try to majorly swing, depending on how much resources and the board's condition, the victory towards you for the next point. And so you want to have a lot of resources going into the propaganda round if you can, because agitation is where you're going to be shifting things back and forth in favor or out of favor for your victory condition. And you're going to really want to be working up to that. There's other things that happen too. There's, depending on what took place during that whole round, there might be prisoners of war. There might be things that must mess with the polarization. There's things that are going on that also be resolved there. But the primary thing in those propaganda rounds is to try to really push things forward in your direction for that victory. All right, so a couple other small things. You could put terror onto the board, which helps you make things more or less easier for you to accomplish. They can slow the enemy down. The number of, like I said, the support and opposition helps you to get troops out faster. In this game, it's a little bit different in the fact that the Reds and the Reds and the Senate want to have activated troops. That's actually a good thing. Whereas the moderates are more classical, that they want to be inactive because when they're active, they're vulnerable. And the other thing I didn't really explain with the moderates are they do things with these news markers to try to take them to places to cash them in. They can cash them in for resources. If the non-moderate player gets a hold of news, they can use that to take, I think, extra limited commands or special actions. And I have to look it up because I haven't actually gotten to a situation where I could have done something like that just yet in the game. And if I haven't demonstrated it doing it, it doesn't stick with me yet. So far I've played through 3/4 of this game. I'm in the final part, but I know I've got enough time in it where I felt like I was comfortable making an initial impression review, which is really all I'm going to be able to do for this game, to give you guys something and to talk about it from a solo perspective. So let me go ahead and take us back to where I'll give you my final thoughts on this one. Okay, so for the best that I could, I tried my best to show you what it's like to see that game a little bit in action from a solo perspective. So here's what I can say. The coin system is a major investment. If you're going to play a coin game, you've got to count on several hours of reading the rules, several hours of doing the walkthrough play, and then your first game probably taking 6+ hours at least. I'm just giving you my perspective. Maybe people will pick up on it sooner. Maybe people will be slower than me. I don't know. But I find that I have to, when even reading all those rules, it takes me a long time to read them through once. I have to then demonstrate, and then I basically have to play that first full game, looking things up constantly and checking my procedures to see if I'm doing it right. And even though it's much easier to do that these days than with the flow chart, with those cards help things, I still have to do that even more so for the conditions on the opponents. That being said, after you get it into your brain, it becomes much easier. I know it's obvious. Oh, of course, once you learn the game, it's easier. But I would say that it does start to make some sense. Once the light bulb turns on as far as priorities and as far as what is the AI doing and why, you don't have to refer as much to the conditions because it would just be how you would play. And I like that. I think that's helpful. And of course it is. I mean, that's how they write these things. And that makes sense to me. And so I did find that things were speeding up. I would also tell you that All Bridges Burning is a much easier to deal with solo experience than anything with 4 factions. With 4 factions, I always found myself playing 2 of the factions and going up against the opposite 2 factions, just because it was so difficult to control 3 AI versus the 2. In this game, I think it is much more solo friendly in that regard. So I like that. I find that the events in this game aren't as major. They are somewhat more limited in scope. So if that doesn't make it so that they're difficult to understand, usually they're pretty straightforward, taking another level of complexity out of those things. But some people might find that a little ho-hum because they end up being spin-offs on actions versus something that really is like, wow, that event is the only way you could ever do that is this and that. I mean, it used to be the events were a little bit more unique and specific. In other coins, I found this one that they were more of a retread of similar actions in certain spaces. That's okay for me because I really just want to have a game that flows, that plays well, that I can play from start to finish without my brain melting out of my ears. And for that, I would give the nod to All Bridges Burning versus all the other ones that I mentioned before. The one in Vietnam, the one in ancient, or I shouldn't say ancient, but I think it's like 3rd century or something, Europe with the Gauls and the Romans. And then even the India game, this one's easier to deal with, to manage, to play. I find it a lot of fun. I'm happy to play it, but I'm going to tell you that a coin is a unique thing. If you like the coin series, you'll like this kind of game, and this is a good one, a good place to start from a solo perspective. If you don't like coins, this is not going to necessarily change your mind. They are just so heavy. People have asked me to do a playthrough. I just can't do it. That video would be hours and hours, and it would be, even if I cut it into parts, it would just be too much to be able to pull off, because I'm still checking the rules and trying to figure it out. There are probably good playthroughs out there that'd be much more beneficial for those who can do it. So I am up for the heavy lift challenge, but I would also say you've got to make sure that not only you're up for it, but that you want to play it regularly so that doesn't fall away. Because what's sad is, right behind me over here, I have to completely learn the Gandhi version again. Completely. Now, some things would be familiar in mechanics, but it would be that investment all over again. So what I would say is, with these kinds of games, if you're going to learn it, you should also want to play it a few times in a row to really get it to sink in. If you play it once, get through it, are exhausted, put away from the shelf, that might not be the best use of your resources and your time. You really ought to play it a couple of times, or maybe put it away, but not for more than a couple days. Bring it back out and play it again. Change it up, try some different factions, whatever. There's a lot of game in there. There's a lot of enjoyment in there for sure. But these are the heaviest games I play, period. They require an immense amount of commitment and learning, and they are not necessarily the most intuitive thing to play out of the box. You have to experience it. That being said, I highly recommend this for those who like coins, who are looking to do solo only. I think it's a very good, very solid game. It's manageable. You can feel the ease, the relative ease of playing it solo much more than you can in the other games. And I really enjoy it, and I think it's a lot of fun. And I'm looking forward to continuing to playing it. But I wanted to get this video out so that people knew and my initial impressions. And I don't think my impressions are really going to change much. I've played enough coin to know that this is what you're in for in this kind of thing. So hope that was very helpful. Regardless of whatever you play in the future, whether it's coin or otherwise, or games, or whatever the situation is, I hope you have a very good time doing it. Thank you so much for watching this video. I appreciate it. Have a good one, everybody.